The draft is done. 20 picks, a lot of arms. We're going to dig into all of the action from the last couple of days and the 2022 draft and the Marlins. Luckily, Ely Sussman is in the house to help me navigate all of the picks the Fish have made. So it's going to be a deep dive on the draft on today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from the hottest place on the planet right now, in England. It really is. And welcome to Locked On Marlins, the Tuesday edition. Don't forget to follow me, of course, guys, on Twitter at Miami Marlins_UK. No TikToks, no Instas. And delighted to welcome onto the show the king of gifts, fish stripes, guru, Ely Sussman is in the house for his second appearance, I believe, but first time on YouTube. So, that's Eli, right. How we doing, brother?
Doing very well. I keep telling myself I was going to get my hair cut well in advance of this to look pretty. Instead, I'm doing what I can with this, getting it out of the way so it's not too distracting for people. But it's a pleasure to be on with you, Peter.
Awesome, mate. Thanks for making the time. And this is a full draft recap, draft summary, however you want to phrase it. We're going to pack it all into one episode. Single episode, 30 minutes max, including ads. So actually, that means it's about 25 minutes. We're going to try our best to navigate that. A disclaimer before we get rolling. I have no knowledge. And I could use that disclaimer for many other episodes I do throughout the year. But for this one, the draft is not my specialty at all. And so I need to lean on guys. I need to lean on the knowledge and expertise that's out there and give us a sense in terms of the way the Marlins have gone, what their overall strategy is, who we like, who we're maybe a little bit doubtful on in picks, who are the ones I'm most excited about. Those kind of themes. That's what we're going to get into today on the episode. Eli, let's start at the top, mate, because, clearly the big names, the pop out, the first overall pick for the Fish, sixth overall in the draft, but the number one pick, round one. It's funny, as you kind of get into this, you look back at the historic picks that the Marlins have made, and it's fair to say it's been a little bit patchy over the years with their first round picks. We got to see one of them, one of the most recent ones anyway, over the weekend. So Max Meyer made his debut, which was great to see. But it's been a bit patchy. What was your take on this one in particular? So they went with a college bat. In some people's view, this was perhaps the best college bat available. It's up for debate, clearly. But what was your take on this one in general?
In terms of college performance, you could not ask anything more of Jacob Berry, who they took number 6 overall. The stats pop up off the screen. Not just the overall production, but the approach that he has. The very rare hitter these days has more walks and strikeouts. You did emphasize that he's a bat. I wouldn't call him like a position player. He's just a bat. He's almost a positionless bat. So he was announced as a third baseman. That's one thing to keep in mind with the draft is they always announce a particular position to you. That doesn't mean they have to hold you to it, but it shows you what the team is thinking. So they drafted him as a third baseman, a position that he has a little bit of experience with. But even when talking to the media afterwards, DJ Svilik, he's the conductor of this draft for the Marlins, the director of amateur scouting. Like he didn't exactly make us feel comfortable about him sticking at third base. He kind of deferred to the player. He said the player is very confident that he can play that important position. I think the more likelihood is that he moves to DH or first base or a corner outfield spot. And ultimately, as long as he hits anything like he did in college, both with LSU, and that's in Louisiana, if you are not familiar, and the year prior to that, he was in Arizona State. If he hits anything like that in the pros, they don't care what position he plays. He's extraordinary. He's a switch hitter. He's not particularly great physique for baseball. He's about 6 foot even. He's not he's not chiseled, you could say, as an athlete, but he just seems to be an extraordinarily gifted hitter that knows exactly what he needs to do to slug and how to get on base, how to do it from both sides of the plate. There are a lot of similarities to the JJ Bleday pick 3 years prior. That was the number 4 overall pick. So there are some similarities there, and that's a pick that hasn't quite aged the way that you would love. I think when it's all said and done, the reason why I was kind of dissatisfied with this was more so about the other players that were on the board at the time, other college players such as Brooks Lee from Cal Poly and Kevin Parada from Georgia Tech, players that would have a little bit more defensive value and probably just as much, if not more, offensive upside if they tap into their abilities as well. I felt that this was in some people's opinions a safe pick. I kind of have concerns that it might not even be completely safe just because of the lack of defensive position that he has. He's going to really have to just be a great hitter, continuing moving forward to justify this decision, because he's going to, as we'll get into, he's going to consume about half of their total spending in this entire draft class on one player. Half of their bonus pool will probably go to Jacob Berry, and that means that he'll need to be a pretty consistent big leaguer in order to make them feel good about that further down the road.
For sure. Do they expect to go under slot on this one? Based on the fact that, he's positionless, he may have been expected to go a little bit further down, perhaps. Are they maybe expecting to go under slot, do you think, or more just kind of aligned to the number?
To give the numbers, so his slot value is a tiny bit over $6 million. And for the Marlins overall, when you include this little wiggle room that they have, they can spend about $11 million total to sign their players in the first 10 rounds of the draft. I think it was Joe Frisaro, when they made the pick shortly after, he seemed to be reporting that he'll get close to slot value. Based on the subsequent picks that they made, it does seem like they're going to try to get him a little bit under that $6 million figure. That's going to be very important. As much as the draft is about talent, a lot of it is also about money. And it's about juggling this money that Major League Baseball has put in what's pretty strict spending limits on what teams can use to acquire younger players. And that's a whole different tangent we could go off on, and whether that's the right choice or not. But that's the reality that we live in. And to the Marlins' credit, I think they've done a really creative job the last few years under DJ Spillick at using almost every cent that they have and signing almost all the players that they draft.
Yeah, it's been one of the key takeaways when I've looked back on historic drafts and following the coverage subsequently is they've managed to get deals done. They've taken some picks. I mean, Khalil Watson last year, there's a kind of good example of that. They took, a guy 16th overall. He was perhaps expected to go higher, but they found ways to make the money work and to get him signed. There's been other situations, the drafts before that. So the Marlins have been good at making the money work for the talent that they've drafted. So I think it's been one of the key attributes that they've done well, seemingly within this draft situation. So Jacob Berry goes at 6 overall. The Marlins then, for the next 9 picks, decide to go arm heavy, which I think was very intriguing. And equally, there's some players in there that subsequently I've seen some the names buzzing on Twitter. And this is it, you start to kind of get, a couple of highlights, a couple of bits. But Eli, what was your take more generally on the strategy to go 9 arms on the bounce? They actually went, I think, 12 arms on the bounce overall, but effectively the first 10 rounds, it was a Jacob Berry and then 9 arms to kind of complement that. What was your take on that strategy overall?
I wouldn't necessarily call it the strategy. I think if you guys, they'll be pretty frank about that they, in most of these spots, they look for, in many cases, the best available, all the information they have. In other cases, as you get deeper, it's just about the best fit for your organization, guys that you feel you can get the most potential out of. So understandably, the concern that you're voicing, that a whole lot of others are echoing, is that this team, look at the team at the major league level, and they're very deficient offensively. And that that doesn't need to go any further on that. They need offensive players. It's just that the amateur draft is not the place to go to address immediate needs on your major league roster. Even Jacob Berry, as polished a hitter as he comes, we're not going to see him in the majors until at least the end of 2023, more likely 2024, if everything goes right. Realistically, these guys are not immediate reinforcements for this year or for next year. And you never know what the higher levels of this farm system could churn out between now and then. You draft the guys. The draft operation is loosely connected with the rest of the front office, but it's only a loose connection. This is not Kim Eng hovering over all of it necessarily and like relating it to the major league level. It's about letting DJ Spilick cook the way that he has been the last few years and pick the players that he feels a few years down the road are going to have more value than they had at draft time. And that either means that they're going to be valuable major league players for the Marlins, or they're going to be important trade chips for the Marlins to use. So he's just picking guys that he feel will be successful. Just to go through a few of these arms, I did highlight a few ahead of time because we don't have time to get into every single one of them.
We don't. We definitely don't.
The second pick, the one that went immediately after Barry, was this high school pitcher, right-hander Jacob Miller from Central Ohio. And this is kind of a theme, is that his most standout traits are his breaking balls. He has both a curveball and a slider coming along. And it's really a curveball that is already regarded as plus pitch that he has with all its attributes. And we've seen this in previous years with the Marlins, and that's something that's continued in a lot of this draft class, is they prioritize players that already have a standout breaking ball that they feel you go to the pros, and at the very least, they're going to be able to create some swing and miss. And that gives them a higher floor than some other pitchers where they're not completely raw in that regard. So I'd expect him, the slot value for that pick is, I think, over $1.5 million. Not sure
might need more.
All of that. But that he's a very significant part of this class. I think people noticed his post-draft interview on MLB Network. It was very short, but it was impressive.
I liked it.
The sense of humor he showed, and also the humility that he showed. That was a lot of fun. He was at the draft in person in LA, and that was a positive first impression for all the people who had no idea who he was prior to hearing his name come out. The pick right after that, Carson Millbrandt. He's another right-hander. And he is one of the youngest players in this entire draft. He just turned 18 very recently. Somebody that seems even more raw than Miller does. He has the makings of having a starting pitcher's repertoire, but still needs to iron it out. And as Craig Mish put out, he seems to be the one player in these early rounds that will go over slot value if they are to sign him. I think the likelihood is that all these guys in the first 2 days are going to sign, with very, very few exceptions. I think the Marlins are going to pay this guy what he wants, but it might be the slot value is $747,000. So if they're going to go over that, you're talking about a $1 million player potentially in order to keep him away from his college commitment. I think that he's a Vanderbilt commitment, but the one other pitcher, two other guys I'll touch on really quickly from day two is the fourth rounder, Marcus Johnson out of Duke. And this was a snap reaction to this that I saw was pretty unpopular, just because his numbers this season in college were terrible. He had an ERA close to 6. He gave up a ton of home runs. And this was him. He'd been a reliever prior to that in college, and they gave him an opportunity to start. And clearly that transition had some ups and downs to it. But the stuff is pretty good on its own, and the projectability with him is what stands out. There don't seem to be a whole lot of special athletes in this entire Marlins draft class, but he's probably at the top of the list. He's 6'6", but still has a lot of room to fill out. He's a skinny 6'6" for now. And for a college player to still have room to grow in their body, which would presumably add velocity as well as help their durability moving forward, that's exciting. And all of his secondary pitches are really tantalizing. Like, you could see if they're using the right way and tweaked the proper way, he's going to get a lot of swings and misses. The question once you get to this point from like the fourth round below is you wonder if any of these guys are truly going to be starting pitchers or relief pitchers. That's obviously a very big difference. He seems to be one of the guys that I do like his upside a lot relative to the draft position that they got him at. And on my podcast, I think on Thursday, we'll talk about this. They picked a pair of guys from Louisiana Tech University. They're not to be confused with LSU, Louisiana State, which is one of the bigger universities in all of the U.S. This is Louisiana Tech, which is like a baby brother school. And they picked two pitchers from this very small conference school, right-hander Kyle Krieger and left-hander Cade Gibson. And I'm going to be speaking to somebody from that school about those guys in particular to get more info. But Krieger, their 7th round pick, he has very filthy stuff. And he was using this weird role in college where they just almost every single game, it seems like he was pitching in relief. They really did not hesitate to use him in every single important game in the later innings. But what makes him intriguing is that he seems to have some potential to be stretched out as a starter, and that's unusual. Usually, if you're a full-time reliever in college, it's unusual for those guys to be reverted to a starting role in the pros and actually have success in that role. But just the diversity of pitches that he has with a mid-90s fastball, with an incredible breaking ball that gets a ton of sweeping action to it and got great swing and miss in college, and a changeup and a curveball as well.
Oh, my
And
days.
he had so many pitches that he couldn't really use all of them when pitching in relief for an inning into at the time. He is, because he's an older player. I don't think it's going to be a huge signing bonus number, but that's a name that stuck out in that if you dig deep into some of the draft analysts that I trust the most, they are very excited about Kyle Krieger in the 7th round.
I've seen that name buzzing. It's one of them. Like I said, you do, keep your eyes peeled, and I have seen that name popping on Twitter. So interesting for sure. I mean, the general vibe I get is that, like, they've picked some nice arms. Some of them may profile better as relievers, but overall, particularly at the top of the draft in particular, they've got some real high stuff guys, and look like some interesting ideas. Just to go back to what you mentioned about the fact that they went with 9 arms, and there's clearly some offensive deficiencies at the big league level, and maybe even a tier below that right now, maybe as an organization perhaps. But I just wanted to be clear. I've absolutely no problem with that strategy for the Fish. Like, there's one thing that we're good at, it seemingly, is identifying pitching talent and developing that pretty well. And so I'm all in. I kind of wanted them to go one hitter. I wanted to get Jacob Berry and then go 19 arms in a row. I thought that would have been sexy.
I do want to mention, people have short memory, but at the start of last year's draft, they went hitter, 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 hitter. I think 6 or 7 in a row at the top of that draft. And those guys have had mixed results so far in the pros. Those were big investments, and I think they still believe in those guys. It starts from Khalil Watson, and it goes through a lot of college players as well. They're still confident in those players, and I think that explains why they didn't want to do that a second straight year.
Yeah.
There needs to be a balance, even at the lower levels of the minors and the middle levels, between both high caliber hitting and pitching. I think that may have been a factor as well, understanding that they already had a lot of talent that aren't major league ready yet, but they invested a lot in just 1 year ago.
Yeah, for sure. There's some other thoughts too, which I think may be legitimate, clearly, is the fact that the Marlins may need to unload some of their pitching at maybe the higher to the mid levels of the system right now, or whatever. Because again, as come back to the point we made, that there is some deficiencies, and so the Marlins are going to need to address this somehow. And one of the most obvious ways is clearly moving some of these arms. So maybe that is kind of the thought. Some of the thoughts coming in here now is, have they gone heavy on arms to restock a farm? They're perhaps looking to maybe empty slightly to go and get some, major league hitting. Do you think there's any true? I'm not sure truth's the right word, but you know what I'm saying? Like, could you see that being one of the elements that are fed into this for taking so many arms? Or, I guess there's so many different possible answers to that, right?
A tiny bit.
A tiny, yeah.
That just feels inevitable anyway, doesn't it? With
it does.
All the arms that they have, I don't feel that it's connected in that sense. That's just, they were going in that direction one way or the other, especially at this particular moment. We know getting close to getting more exciting arms, not just from the minors, but back from the injured list that were injured before, and the ones that have pitched in their place have stepped up in a way that there is in a very pressing situation where there's going to be an imbalance between the number of qualified pitchers they have to squeeze onto the major league roster and the number of spots that they have for them. And the pieces of the current team, it's not an optimal fit in this situation. We've seen that, how this team is not, from the very beginning, the construction of this team was a little fishy, and it has played out in such a way that they're improved from a year ago, but not as good as they could be if they made the right tweaks. So regardless, within the next couple of weeks, I'm sure you're bracing for plenty of transactions, because to switch up the way that this team is comprised, no doubt they do still have a good amount of pitching depth, and depth that they can spare in order to address the obvious positions of need on the offensive side.
No doubt. what are wondering and thinking, we are 20 minutes in and we still haven't had an ad. So I'm going to drop the first ad of the day, and they may come thick and fast. They might be 2 almost back to back. But nevertheless, first ad of the day, guys, it's our good friends over at BlueNile.com. And you can celebrate all of life's special moments, from creating custom engagement ring of the dreams to gifting a classic and timeless you won't find at a traditional jeweler's. So if you're thinking about popping the question or celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. So if you're thinking about engagement, they've got you covered. Simple online tools will let you choose the diamond shape, size, bigger is better, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's jewelers will then handcraft her perfect engagement ring, each one, yes sir, one of a kind, bespoke. If you've already done it, if you've already got the ring on it, thinking about special moments, then don't worry about it. Blue Nile also got you covered with fine jewelry. If you're having trouble choosing, don't worry. Blue Nile, they've got jewelry experts on hand 24/7. They're sitting by the phone just waiting for your call. Or if you need a chat, don't worry about it. Find your memorable gift at every budget. Here's the kicker right now. You can make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Blue Nile anniversary sale is now fired up. You can save up to 40%, 40% on fine jewelry pieces and 25% on engagement ring settings. Boy, oh boy, that is huge discounts from the boys at BlueNile.com. Plus, listen, every order is insured, of course, as it should be. It ships free. It arrives in discreet packaging. It's not going to give away what's inside. So shop stress-free. Find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. Oh, baby. Blue Nile it is. I think Jazz Chisholm's been shopping at BlueNile.com from what I've seen based on his red carpet today. It's looking absolutely sensational. Jazz is popping. From the back end of the draft, so we've kind of had the final 10 rounds today. The Marlins didn't go 10 pitches today. Were there any stand pop to you? And how have you, and then when you piece it all together, how do you see this draft as a whole in totality? 20 picks, a lot of arms early. What's the standouts from today, and how are you feeling about this draft overall?
What do you see with, they did go back to some position players on the final day of the draft. How many do we have here? It was beginning with the 13th pick with Chase Latrell. He's a center fielder. 1, 2, 3.
I think they took a middle
4,
infielder.
5.
I think they took a catcher.
They took 5 out of the last 10 rounds. They went back to hitters. And what I noticed about them, similar to Barry, is that they put a lot of trust in guys that simply performed in college. They're just banking on performance, and it's not always that simple conversion one way or the other. It does make it more difficult to criticize and second guess in hindsight if you always go with somebody that's already proven. If you want to go to the 18th round, this catcher, Spencer Bramwell, they found him in a Division II school out west, and he, as a catcher, he put up an OPS of 1195 this past season, nearly 1200.
Is he related to Nick Fortes? It must be his brother.
His career numbers were similar to that as well. He's an older player. It's Division II as well, but that's just an extreme example of them trusting in performance. I know there's some excitement about this 14th round pick, Tauren Montgomery, who was in Missouri. So that's a bigger conference school, and he put up an OPS right around 1,000 this past year with what seems to be really exciting power potential that didn't entirely translate in college, and yet he was able to be very productive. The one guy I really want to talk about in this final day was their 17th round pick. His name is Evan Crest. He's a right-handed pitcher, 18 years old, out of high school. He's the smallest player in their draft class. He's listed at 5'11", 165, and he's a professional baseball player potentially. But
there you go.
So this is going to be a big determinant in whether I feel their draft was successful or not, is whether they're able to sign him, because he's not a traditional 17th round pick. He's a player that has a commitment to go to Jacksonville University, and they're going to have to pay him in the middle 6 figures, I imagine, to sign him. He's going to be one of the probably top 5 highest paid players in their class if they're able to make the money work and bring him to the pros. He reminds me of a 2019 pick they made, who was right-hander Chris Mockma, who was in a very similar situation. He fell to the 12th round. There was a lot of question about whether he would sign or not, because he had a college commitment as well, and they paid him, I think, $557,000 to bring him in the pros. The results of that have not been great, so that's not an encouraging comp to make. This one, so as tiny as he is, he doesn't yet throw hard. His fastball mostly sits in like the high 80s to this point, but he really has promising a really deep pitch mix. He has mechanics in such a way and an extension off the mound that makes it play faster than the radar gun would suggest. He just has so much potential to fill out physically a little bit, maybe to grow a little higher than 5'11". You never know when somebody is still finishing up high school as well. The tools are extremely exciting. I think it's a changeup that is the potential to be the big weapon that he has, at the very least an above average pitch, but probably even more than that as well. So he's a bit of a project and will be an expensive project. That's the name that I was anticipating. I was anticipating them taking a swing like this during the final day of the draft. Yeah. And so there's no guarantee they'll be able to sign him. I think the number is almost exactly 50-50. The one person I need to shout out here on draft coverage is Carlos Collazo of Baseball America. He put out the number that right around at 50% of high school players that go on the final day of the draft end up signing. So it's a coin flip with him. With the Marlins, more often than not, they've been able to juggle the money in such a way to bring him aboard. But he is a very critical piece of this draft class. And I think people can feel a lot better about the haul that they got if they are able to squeeze him in the resources that they have.
I wonder, again, when you piece it together with some of those earlier picks from, more obscure schools or colleges, and you think, actually, can they maybe save a couple of $100,000 here and there, or $50,000 here and there on these guys, and then you kind of like back it all up, and you can then get this high school dude in the 17th round that's going to need, let's say $300,000 or whatever it is to make a deal. So, this is it. It's how it all pieces together. And when they've kind of made all these picks, it's like, right, how can you take a flyer on a high school guy with that maybe 17th round? Like you said, it was Mockborough in the 12th a few years ago, and I remember that pick, and I remember them saying it felt like a good pick at the time. If they can get it done and get him signed, they did. Like you said, hasn't quite worked out on the field thus far, but we'll wait and see. Let me do the final ad, and then I'll come for your kind of overall summary, Eli, on this one. And equally as well, if there was anyone that you didn't like, which maybe is probably hard to say at this stage, but nevertheless, let's finish up with our final ad of the day. It's our good friends, of course, over at Built Bar, and it is Coconut Brownie Chunk Puff season. Say that fast if you can. So, from the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably tried the amazing Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends are Built. They've got you covered with Coconut Brownie Chunk, the puff treatment for it. Yes, sir. So that's right. Coconut Brownie Chunk Built puff flavor you love in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. Boy, oh boy. Listen, I'm going to start a petition right now. Built Bar, you need to send some of these over to the UK. They don't ship to the UK. What the hell? They need to start that right now because these sound amazing. I am drooling. They sound amazing. They're good for you, low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and of course, delicious. So, how do I get them? So that's the first thing. Go to built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 as LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Reminder, LOCKED15, 15% off your order at built.com. All right then, Eli, overall summary from your perspective of the Marlins. And what's the grade? Let's kind of, boil it down if we can. Everyone likes a grade. Summary and grade for you on the 22 draft for the Fish.
I knew you would ask that, which is why I came up with some letters in my mind about it.
I knew. Yeah, exactly. It's easy to boil it down. It's like, it's like war, right? It's just a number that we can all kind of turn to and go, was it good? Was it bad?
Yeah.
Grades we get.
There were some consistencies here that I like to see with trusting in the hitters that performed in college. On the pitching side, trusting in the pure stuff, but more so like the secondary stuff, not even chasing fastball velocity as well. That seems to be a bit of a swerve away from the rest of the industry, where almost none of these guys have exceptional velocity, but it's all the other ingredients that they feel make them effective, give them different looks. You hear about that a lot when you talk about pitching staffs in the big leagues. They took a couple nice swings in the final day of the draft as well, and they just, in general, it just feels like they went with players that they trust that can develop properly. So I was for reasons I explained, I'm not happy with the way they started it with Jacob Berry. I thought there could have been better value there. And as I mentioned at the end, I think a really critical swing piece is this 17th round pitcher that they selected out of high school, whether he signs or not, Evan Crest. So I will, if they sign Evan Crest and everybody else in this class, if they go 20 for 20, I would give it a B+. I think it was a good draft if they do that. If they whiff on Evan Crest, I think it's almost a full letter grade down. It's more like a C+. It's kind of middle of the pack where they got a lot done, but it's still not quite enough upside that you'd ideally want from this kind of haul when you're drafting early. And so for the moment, I think you split the difference. And I would say it's a B-. They did some nice things here. They salvaged what I thought was a kind of questionable start to it as well. And I don't think the casual fans are going to be super excited about it just because there's not a ton of bats in the middle there. Overall, this was fine, especially for a team that they traded the draft pick before. They didn't have as much resources as they're accustomed to when you're usually drafting number 6 overall, and they did an adequate job of making it work.
You make a good point. I completely forgot about the fact that they traded away their comp pick. Which deal was that part of? I've forgotten which deal that was, the trade they made in the offseason. Can you recall?
That was the Tanner Scott Cole Sulcer trade with the Orioles.
There you go. It was the Orioles trade. That's right. I remember them trading it away, but I can't remember who to. We obviously made a ton of trades. So, that was it a second round comp pick? I can't recall specifically where it was. I feel like it was. So,
number 67 overall, I believe. And the value of that was more than $2 million. And they're both, well, something like that. I'll have to double check that number for you. It was definitely over $1 million in wiggle room. It made a significant difference. It was a handicap, no doubt, for the whole draft team going into this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I remember Craig Mish talking about that trade specifically at the time, saying, okay, a couple of pieces went back, but actually it was that pick specific marketing they valued on, that managed to get a deal done. And let's kind of, look at that trade now with some hindsight. It was a good trade. Like the Marlins absolutely needed it. And, Scott in particular, Sulcer as well, kind of flashed early. Has obviously been on the IL since, but, Tanner Scott has been adventurous and relatively effective in the closing role for sure. One final one, I just wanted to get your take on the situation with Khalil Watson, actually, kind of, because obviously the big draft pick from last year slid down the draft. The Marlins pulled the trigger at 16. Many of us at that point kind of saying, wow, the Marlins have won this draft no matter what they do next, because the talent, the tools were amazing. He started well, Khalil Watson. It felt like he started fast. And then, there's some growing pains and clearly there'd been some kind of discipline stuff going on. So what's your general assessment of Khalil Watson, where he sits in this kind of Marlins system, organization? Clearly, there's some problems, but you'd like to think they can find a way through that.
Yeah, and I expect them to try to be patient and try to salvage it as best as they can. It's only been 1 year since he fell to them. As you said, it's only been a few months since he was raking at the low A level as one of the younger players at that level. It was evident, though, not that much later, as really a few weeks into the season, it was evident that there were some things to work on with his approach offensively. And clearly the way that he has reacted to failure has been unacceptable. They've set rules for how he's supposed to conduct himself on and off the field, and he has repeatedly violated those rules. And that's how you get to this punishments, it seems, to send him away from the team for what's been several weeks at this point. But that doesn't mean that it's over. He's still just 19 years old. And I think people still need to be patient with him. You don't want to panic, give up on this type of player that is exceptionally talented and who they felt so highly about just 1 year ago. Not everybody from front office 1 year ago is still here after Jeter's exit and Gary Denbo's exit, but some of them are. And I think he still has a lot of allies in this organization that are just trying to get through to him as much as possible. As we heard from Craig Mish's reporting, even from Alex Carver, a fish on the farm, they're doing some unconventional things to try to get him to focus on what's most important in developing as a player. I still like him a lot as a prospect.
Yeah, me too.
And just fingers crossed, because they they really did put a lot of trust in him. I'm not panicking at this very moment, but I understand why people are disappointed in the way that that's gone. And
Yeah,
I think just hopefully over time and with the right voices in his ear, he'll get back on track.
I'm with you. Completely agree on that one. One final one. I said that was the final one, and we're 5 minutes over already. But I have to ask you because we're talking drafts. JJ Bleday, 4th overall pick, a few years back, 2019, I believe that was for Bleday, if I recall correctly. Losing track of years with all these lockdowns. Anyway, Bleday for me, I get the sense that it is Bleday season very, very soon. It has to be because just it is not the outfield just in general has been a bit of a black hole for the Fish this year, unfortunately, at the major league level. Bleday, the power's there. Okay, there's still some concerns, but, he's going to be making his. They got Max up there. I think we're looking at Bleday in the next, week or two at the latest, straight after the deadline. I think Bleday's going to be up. What about you?
Yeah, unless they trade him, and I do. I'm going to put out. I'm going to put out an article on tomorrow that you'll see.
Oh.
I think there's one scenario that could make sense to trade him. I don't expect that to happen. I do expect them to call him up as you illustrated. It's been a big weakness for him. And even center field, he has surprised me that in center field as they have, considering that he has some agility, instinctual limitations as a defender, but they need all the help that they can get at center field and at right field. The fact that he's lefty, that he's a lefty bat, that even makes it easier to fit in as a complement to Avi Garcia. If you want to platoon them, even if it's awkward to play him every single day, he does. There's not a whole lot else that he's going to learn in the minor leagues. I think he is what he is, and he's made some interesting adjustments during pro ball. I know that people aren't overwhelmingly satisfied with it compared to what they were dreaming of coming out of the draft. He still is one of the better prospects in this organization. And I think I'm excited about him. I am excited to see him in the big leagues in the very near future. I hope that they call him up and that they recognize what's most important, which is putting together, trying to make this offense, if not for this year, at least for next year, just get a clearer idea of who these integral pieces are going to be. He deserves an opportunity to prove himself.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I may have been even more bullish talking about him yesterday on the show. I think I was maybe even saying he should be up for Thursday's game. It's kind of just get him up there now. I think we've all seen enough, and it's time. Particularly after that week. I mean, it was just a turgid week. It was just actually it's been a turgid month. In general, they've won games, but the offense in general has been so poor. I think it's time to shuffle the deck in the outfield, particularly. So we'll wait and see on that, how they go. I think they do need to make a move sooner rather than later. But we're out of time. Eli, I have to say, firstly, I want to thank you for joining me on the show and giving us your insight, your knowledge, your thoughts, feedback on this draft. I would have been totally lost. Imagine me trying to do this show solo. I mean, it would have been an absolute car crash. So I would have talked about Khalil Watson and JJ Bleday. I'd okay on that, and maybe a bit of Berry talk. But nevertheless, Eli, thank you, and I think all the listeners equally will be really enjoying this content. So I hope they do. Please comment and let us know your thoughts. Equally, if you disagree with Eli, it wouldn't be the first time that's happened. So let us know what you're thinking. But I'm grateful for you joining me. That is us done for Tuesday's episode. But one final thing, Eli, before we let everyone go, where can they find you, your team, your content, if indeed they're wondering who the hell is Ely Sussman? Which I'd be shocked if anyone's thinking that right now.
You just get your fingers out and you type in Fish Stripes wherever you are, whatever social media you're on, whatever web browser you use, you will find us pretty easily covering all things Miami Marlins. Fishstripes.com, I guess, is the easiest way to organize all that stuff for current coverage of the major league team, minor league team, historical context, opinions, and exclusive reporting and silly game shows. And for better and worse, we are all Marlins all the time at Fish Stripes. And I guess you can find me personally if you choose to on Twitter at Real Eli ELY. They gave me a check mark for some reason, so that might make it easier for you to find me over there as well. As always, Peter, so grateful to talk with you about anything. It's awesome.
Absolutely, brother. I really appreciate it. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed that episode. I really, really, really do. I hope the episode and everything that Eli has thrown out there. I think it was I mean, we've gone 40 minutes. There's 20 picks. That is 2 minutes per pick, effectively. Plus, we've talked about Blade and Watson and a few ads and an intro. I think we've done pretty well. But the time has come to sign out. We're out of here. Thank you for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. And if you are thinking about your second listen of the day, don't forget MLB Prospects. Locked On MLB Prospects is also available for you for your second listen of the day. Lindsey Crosby is hosting that one. And boy, oh boy, he has been pumping out content. He's been 24 content machine there on Locked On MLB Prospects. So go and check it out. Lindsey Crosby doing his thing. But that's me and Eli signing out. I am back tomorrow, Wednesday, and Sean Barrett is back in the house. And we're going to be getting into some fashion conversations, talking about Jazz Chisholm and Starling Marte and their outfits on the red carpet. Perfect. In the meantime, back tomorrow. Appreciate Eli. Go Fish.